BBC documentary series Are Our Kids Tough Enough showed a comparison between British and Chinese education. Li Aiyun is among the 5 Chinese teachers to be invited to the UK to take over a British classroom. How does the effectiveness of Chinese education compare overall with Western models? What qualities are enhanced and encouraged by Western schooling? The British Department for Education announced that it would be introducing math learning methods from Asian countries, especially China. What does this say for the quality of China's education model? President Trump told US media that attending the New York Military Academy was one of the greatest choices he ever made. Did his learning at this stage lay the foundation for subsequent successes? Inequality in education is a global issue. Children from rich families are more likely to have a better education. Does education become a tool to defend class differentiation? What can be done about this?
With more than 180 million students enrolled in basic education, China has the world's largest education system. Over the past decades, the country has seen high-quality schooling help drive its economic growth and technological innovation. What are the merits of Chinese education? How should China reform its education system in light of renewed debates over student workload, strict principles, and intense competition? And what can China learn from Western educational institutions? To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the studio by 2 brilliant women. Zhang Jie, Superintendent of the New York Military Academy, and Li Aiyun, Special Class Teacher of Jiangsu Province, Nanjing Foreign Language School. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue.
Thank you.
First of all, you don't look like Chinese. You look more like a New Yorker. What are the differences in terms of the educational background?
Well, I was born and raised in China, but of course I went to New York.
Where you stayed and lived for?
33 years.
33 years,
Yes.
Come on, this is too
So
long
I
for me.
definitely have lived more than half of my life, way more than in New York. So I do consider myself a New Yorker in many ways. Yeah.
And Li Aiyun, forgive me for calling you this way because I'm a Chinese. But do you think your educational background makes a sea difference between you and Madam Zhang?
Sure.
In what way?
Since, she has lived in America for so many years, I think she might be influenced by the Western culture.
What is the principle, or what are the principles that have shaped your notion about what a good education is actually? What it is about good education?
Well, I think China and the U.S. really do share a lot of same of the educational values, right?
That is very surprising.
But I still believe so. Having lived in China so many years and then lived in the States for so many years, I think there are so many common things. For example, we need to teach the kids knowledge, right? They need to learn knowledge. That's number one, skills, right? And teach them how to learn and teach them a set of values. I think that's a common for both countries. There's no doubt, yes.
Many Chinese who have received very good education and who went to the United States but didn't stay there for long came back with a strong feeling that Americans, particularly in their childhood, are pretty naughty, independent, not necessarily confined to the classroom or textbooks. They are very naughty. They are able to think independently, critically, and they are able to say, in fact, they are encouraged to say no to their teachers. Is that the case?
I think it speaks to a certain truth to it. The elementary classrooms are definitely less structured than what I've seen in China.
Aiyun, you were invited by the British Ministry of Education and you stayed there and got involved in a training program. It's a very interesting experience. The story went viral in China, attracting a lot of the Chinese students and parents like me. What can you tell us about the stark comparison or sharp differences that you have discovered?
As far as I am concerned, I actually agree with Ms. Zhang that, both of us share the same objective, we try our best to prepare the students for future. But when I was in Britain, participating in that program, I found that the students in my school, British school, they were not as disciplined as my students back in China. Maybe.
Did it give you a hard time as a result?
At first, I think I was astonished by their behavior and their,
What kind of behavior was that?
Some of them, they didn't listen to the teachers in class, and they tried to rebel. They tried to challenge the teachers, push the boundary.
What do you mean by pushing the boundary? The way I push the boundary, I think out of the box and push the envelope?
Yeah, we used to think that the students in Western countries, they obey the rules. But when I was there, we found that they would like to do something the teachers asked them not to do. Like they just left school without permission, or they just eating or chatting in class, which was not allowed by the school rules.
I've done many shows about education, and I've interviewed some professors and historians from Cambridge University. They said they are proud of the elite education, which means members and the students are from a wealthy family, aristocratic family. They stand better chance of being educated in a much better way than ordinary folks. And therefore, when you say young British students were not so much disciplined as the Chinese students, I was a little bit surprised, because from my perspective, and particularly in your case, you are now a superintendent of a military academy. Students should be much better disciplined. Do you think you, in this particular area, share a lot of similarities?
Well, first, I think you have to look at what your expectations are, right? Now, I recall my elementary school from Shanghai. My classmates or my fellow classmates were pretty naughty as well. So I think whether you grew up here or grew up in a different country, there definitely characteristics of young children. So what I think the difference I have observed in the States is that children are encouraged to express their opinions, right, and to have accountable talk. That's what we say. So when you walk into a classroom as a former principal or currently a superintendent, I think you don't want to see a quiet classroom. It's a one-way lecturing. You do want to see that it's a student-driven learning style, and kids are responding or to the teacher and to each other as well. So I think it has something to do with what you think, that the classroom should look like. So when you say you walk in, it's noisy, and kids are a little bit out of control, if to say. So it is up to what you think that is a reasonable level of noise and what they're talking about. So I think there's definitely a difference.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But in that case, when we were in Britain, there are a lot of reasons behind that, because those students, they volunteered to participate in that program. Mostly, they just wanted to act in the TV, in the documentary. So they thought it was fun. And, much longer hours at a school made them very crazy. Right. Yeah, lots of differences.
So they did not behave normally, a little bit out of the norm.
Yeah. And I was told that they used to be very polite, and they behaved themselves when they were in the normal school.
It came as no surprise that your unique teaching experience in the British classroom may have highlighted the cultural shocks. But give us an example to illustrate a moment of embarrassment for you in the first few days of your arrival in that British school. What were the things that you felt extremely embarrassed and you want to share with the audience here?
Okay, in the first week, I still remember that one evening, because we have self-study time, after school, just copied the example of Chinese teaching style. And when I was watching them doing self-study, some students chatting very happily, and I looked at them, and I thought that, you know, when I was in China, if I look at my students in this way, they will follow me. But those students, they just said sorry, and they kept chatting or doing other things, which I was, you know, I couldn't accept at that time. But gradually, I understood them, and we compromised with each other, actually.
And I believe you must have had many conversations with your British counterparts. Yeah. And in your private conversation, what were the questions they asked to try, you know, to learn more from the Chinese teacher? Because to my knowledge, more is being done by the British government and British teaching staff to learn from the Chinese way of education. Mm-hmm. What did you say to them?
You know, my British students, they usually asked me about what my students in China were like. I think they were most interested in their, you know, in the students of their age.
Mm-hmm. Then what about your counterparts, your colleagues, the British teachers? What did they ask?
And my colleagues, actually, they didn't talk with me a lot because we stayed in the same school, but there was a separate place just for us Chinese teachers. So we didn't have a lot of communication.
You know, this is something that has really embarrassed me.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 1990s, when I was studying in Wales University, mm-hmm. Chinese students, some of them were sponsored and sent to the UK to study by their own danwei, or the government.
Government.
They tend to mix with the Chinese students instead of having coffee with the British or other international students. Mm-hmm. This is one of the problems, you know.
I totally agree. I have consistently told all of the new students, new arrivals, graduate students, undergraduate students, because I told them that you must take opportunity of every single minute, because if you don't, you are not going to improve. When I left China to go to the States in the 1980s, we were thrown into the, you know, all the local students. We really tried so hard to mix with them. And I've seen examples where if you don't try, and nowadays they land, their WeChat stays, you know, the connection through WeChat, or I've seen so many graduate students, college students, they already found a Chinese roommate when they land. So I really do see, I think there is an issue there, yeah.
Right, I believe I'm not the first interviewer to do this conversation with you about your unique and very interesting teaching experience in the UK. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were to be asked to write a book, if not an article, about your feelings, your thoughts, your happy moments, or the other way around, what would you say in the first few chapters?
I would say that this is one of my most unforgettable experience. And
will it be more painful or just meaningful? Let's put it in a neutral way.
Meaningful.
Meaningful.
Yeah.
And you were interviewed by Chinese media. What did you say to them in the first few questions? Did you say, I'm still recovering from the shocks, this is something that led to more of the scrutiny of the mm-hmm. cultural differences, or you think, well, the European Union and the Chinese, they share more than differences? What do you think of the
Actually, you know, it was not the first time for me to be overseas, because I spent 1 year teaching in America.
Why were you selected to go to the UK to be part of this exchange program?
One of my students who studied in America, she recommended me to, you know, this documentary, and they interviewed me.
Oh, this is a BBC documentary.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they asked me if I had interest in joining this program, and at first I was very confused because, you know, I'm an English teacher. I didn't know what I was expected to teach in Britain. Mm-hmm. But they said, you know, you Chinese are good at grammar. Maybe you can teach them grammar. So I taught English grammar in Britain, and also Mandarin. And also I taught social study, because they think this is about moral education, which is very particularly in China.
One famous general of the U.S. Civil strife has said famously, forget about the grammar, forget about the bloody grammar, okay? Just talk, say whatever you like. Do you think this is the way that highlights the American English teaching?
I think so, yeah. I worked in the New York public school system for 28 years, and I've really learned that English is taught through literature, especially at the high school level. Exactly what you just said. You're given a book, you read for a period of time, and you write your reflection. Teachers will correct, and you will learn sort of your writing skills through it. That is a very typical way to teach English, and that is why nowadays, even with my secretary, who is an American, who writes a draft letter for me, and I go there, I correct the grammar. Yes. Yeah. The difference is that I have trouble, I suppose I still say after 33 years, to initiate a long writing, right? However, after something is handed to me, I have many things, just like what you did before the program started. Yes, the grammar, you pay attention to what is correctly done. Yeah.
Yeah, and we tend to put the grammar in context, which will be easier. That's right, yes.
Well, very interesting conversation about your personal experiences and the feeling about the educational system, if any cultural differences. You are watching Dialogue with Zhang Jie, Superintendent of the New York Military Academy, and Li Aiyun, Special Class Teacher of Jiangsu Province, Nanjing Foreign Language School. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, the presidency of Donald Trump is said to be very unpredictable, and he's a maverick president in the U.S. history. He got the background of your military academy.
Correct.
My first question is, do you think this maverick style of a President Donald Trump is actually, or was characterized and affected by his experience with the military academy in New York?
Well, first of all, I've only joined the academy for less than 2 years, right? And President Trump went to the school many, many years ago when I was still kind of a young child. So I have learned about his experience through media, through the same ways that you've learned. He constantly speaks very highly of his experience at our school, NEMA, that's what we call it in short. And I feel that even far before his involvement in politics, he was a very famous alum to the school as a successful business person. So I want to say that from the information I have gathered, I think the school definitely contributed to in his education greatly, and he definitely is an outstanding alum.
Whatever their serious differences and disputes on the campaign trail between Hillary Clinton, the presidential candidate, and Donald Trump, it seems that the only thing that Hillary praised Donald Trump was the family education. We have schooling on the campus, but first and foremost we have the parents who are said to be the first teacher in our life. And do you think this makes a big difference between the East and West, Aiyun?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you, because I think actually parents' roles play maybe the most important part in children's growth. And we say that parents are their first teachers in their life. So if parents, they can use scientific education methods to help their children to grow, usually there are no problems for the kids to grow up.
Teachers could also be students. They learn a lot from their children, from their students. This is part of our learning curve.
Okay.
I'm an interviewer, but I think each edition of Dialogue is an opportunity for me to learn, to draw inspirations from the guest speakers, given their diversified cultural background and their profession. That makes a big difference. So what have you learned from your children, I mean your daughter, who is so brilliant as far as I'm concerned?
So actually, when she was a child, I think I disciplined her a lot. That,
you do regret?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, as a teacher and as a parent, I think we usually act very differently. I know that I was not that idealistic, because when I educated her or during her growing up, I was, sometimes as I was not that calm, I had very high expectations on her, so that I was very strict with her. But looking back, I feel regretful.
What surprised me about the family education, the first family in the United States, Ivanka and Kushner, is that Ivanka acts so nicely. She looks so elegant. And elegance is, of course, first of all, an attitude about life. How come we have such a big difference between Donald Trump, the father, and Ivanka, the daughter? The daughter is everything the opposite, the character of her father.
I guess that has something to do with what your role is.
Instead of character. Character, in fact, is the fate. Character helps to seal the fate of one individual. Do you agree?
Well, one thing I can say that we play different roles in life, right? I am a mother and I am a superintendent now. I think I act differently. I wouldn't say good or bad, I'm a wife, right? So I think we do have our own standards when you perform your duties as a particular role. So in contrast to what she just said, and maybe that is what's called a little westernized. Yeah, I also raised 2 children, and I did choose a different approach when raising the 2 children. I was much more lenient and also letting them choose things that they were interested in doing. So I ended up raising 2 very different children.
A very close friend of mine was studying in Warwick University, the UK. One day, a British gentleman came up to her and said, "I like your smile, very charming. You are a very good ambassador of Chinese culture." Does it mean automatically in the understatement there is a note of irony that they have developed a stereotyped image about the Chinese?
I agree. Sometimes, statistically, they do find that we are, all Asians, a little distant from communicating with more, I would not say less friendly, but kind of sort of keep to themselves, right? I remember a story when I was the assistant principal of a large high school in Queens, New York, and after a couple months, and someone said in the hallway, "Oh, I'm glad you're still smiling." And meaning the job is so challenging and you're still smiling. And my answer was, that's the easy part.
The last question is very much about the success story that students may or may not have in the second stage of their life after graduating from, say, the university and the schools of higher learning. Why do we see increasingly Western students, the whites, forgive me for saying that, become more successful, and the Indians from South Asia also turn out to be more successful in the United Nations and other international agencies and departments? Is that because of their good command of English, or it's largely the contributions of different cultural background?
I think it's both. Yes.
The Chinese students may have better performance in the area of mathematics, physics and chemistry. However, when it comes to providing good public service and to have a good communicative skills, that could be one of the things that may fail them.
I think, again, that has a lot to do with what we began at the beginning of this program about early education style. It's more a dialogue-based, more student-centered, right? So I do feel in elementary schools in the States, kids are encouraged to speak, to say no to adults, and I think that does give them the opportunity to become more confident and independent and basically in the field that you've described, and they're more successful.
The British Department of Education announced in 2016, 2 years ago, that it would allocate £54 million pounds for 8,000 primary schools in the country for the purpose of introducing math learning and methods from Asian countries, especially China. Madam Zhang was a teacher of mathematics. What can you say on why Chinese students tend to have a better performance?
I do think that it's inevitable for British government to do so, to take this action, because we say that nobody is a lonely island in the world. If we want to improve ourselves, we need to learn from others. So I admire British government because they are very open. Even though they are a developed country, they wanted to learn something from. When they find that China has something for them to learn, they are open enough to learn from China. I admire them, but I think it's very wise of them to do so.
Very quickly, to conclude our discussion here about educational differences between the East and the West, what would you say that you consider the most important thing for a good educator?
Well, first of all, you really have to be passionate about education. And secondly, I think we talked about the importance of giving students knowledge, giving them work skills, and also good citizenship. Right? I think that's something I would say these are a couple of important things as educators we always keep in mind. That is what we're doing. There's never anything that's too small to do. And I often get questions like, you're the principal of, I used to be the principal of a very good high school, big high school, and they'll say, why are you doing this? I said, there's never anything that's too little to a child's education. Our goal is to make them very successful far beyond high school life.
In terms of being a good educator, for me, I think it's very important for the teachers to set a good example to the students. If the teachers don't do well, how can they educate the students?
Again, this is a very typically Chinese culture, to be a role model for the target you're going to communicate with. Thank you for being with us, and I think this is a good lesson, a part of our learning curve. Every day we may not necessarily educate, but we prefer to be educated so that we can develop and grow. Until next time, goodbye.